The opioid epidemic has gripped the United States for years, and laboratory professionals are often positioned at the forefront in vital surveillance and analysis. To talk us through how they can be most effective, I'm joined by Frederick Strathmann, who will be presenting a talk on that very subject at the meeting. Frederick, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So what role do laboratory professionals play in the opioid epidemic?
So it's interesting. That's pretty diverse, and I think that's sort of what our session is really going to focus on is sort of the wide-ranging roles that laboratorians play. There's lots that the laboratory has to do, from developing tests to determining which analytes need to be looked at, which drugs need to be looked at, and also how that information is disseminated so that way it can be actionable by the different state agencies or federal agencies that may rely on that information.
What is AACC's 2019 position statement, and how does this session align?
Yeah, so that's great. So, I'm excited for others to see how our collective efforts align with AACC's position statement about the opioid epidemic. The statement itself, it lays out the various areas that laboratories are needed, and that ranges from test utilization, making new methods, to surveillance, partnerships, and even the communication of those results. NMS Labs in particular, where I work, is a private organization known for being at the forefront of toxicology testing in many areas, but we certainly couldn't do what we do alone, and we would fall very short of the expectations set forth by AACC in that position statement if we tried to do it independently. So we are fortunate to have established a strong relationship with the research arm of a nonprofit called Frederick Reader's Family Foundation, specifically the Center for Forensic Science Research and Education. And this collaboration has allowed us to leverage private-public partnerships, which is something that is discussed in the position statement, to really extend our collective reach to include seized drugs at the port of entry, all the way through postmortem toxicology and the eventual sharing of those results. And so that continuum of resources, in my mind, is the essence of what AACC was challenging the laboratory community to be a part of in its position statement.
Interesting. So what else is going to be new at this session?
So this session, I think, is going to be interesting and unique for AACC in that it brings a lot more of the forensic experience to the opioid epidemic efforts than what we may normally discuss at the annual meeting. So the clinical laboratory, certainly critical in identifying opioid use, informing physicians to help guide treatment options, and to ensure abstinence with compliance, drug treatment testing efforts. But our counterparts in forensic toxicology are uniquely positioned in that they are both earlier and later in the entire testing process. So a lot of forensic laboratories conduct testing on seized drugs, and part of our session will talk about efforts on that front, as well as data analytics to share those findings. In addition, the unfortunate endpoint is the need for postmortem toxicological analyses, which is also done in the forensic setting. And so this session will really provide, I think, a much broader view of the various roles that different types of laboratories and partnerships can play in the opioid epidemic.
Can you talk a little bit about some of who the presenters are going to be at the session and how they were identified?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate to know and work very regularly with Donna Papson and Dr. Alex Krutulski. So besides the obvious skills and expertise that they each bring, I'm excited to have them present with me as they truly are at the front lines in their respective areas. So Donna is a practicing toxicologist, and she is actively involved in case interpretation on a daily basis. And this ranges from areas such as postmortem as well as DUID testing. In addition, she leads an internal strategy team that's a collection of subject matter experts that span numerous internal departments to keep our efforts aligned. On the other hand, Alex is what I would say is a certifiable wizard when it comes to mass spectrometry, and his expertise and knowledge of high mass accuracy mass spectrometry is evident in probably the thousands of hours he has actually spent with his hands on an instrument and his brains behind the analytical efforts in this area. His role is also as a research scientist at that nonprofit foundation I mentioned. He focuses on forensic sciences, but he also oversees projects that include major federal agencies in private and public partnerships focused on the opioid epidemic, as well as novel psychoactive substances in general. And then for my part, I see in many ways as the manual that would come with an opioid epidemic laboratory in a box, where it would say, caution, read instructions before use, as failure to do so may cause severe frustration later with data analytics.
So what actions do you think that attendees will be able to take after attending this session?
What I'm hoping is that attendees are proud to see the impact that the laboratory is actually having in stopping the opioid epidemic, and that they recognize aspects of their daily work and what we are actually presenting. And at the same time, I want the attendees to recognize the seriousness of what we are doing and what we're being asked to do as a laboratory community, and to not enter into this area very lightly. So to me, very similar with COVID-19 pandemic, there are different roles and responsibilities required from each of us to achieve these collective goals. And we really want to provide insights, some lessons learned, and to generate some new potential allies in the efforts to stop the opioid epidemic.
Any other key takeaways that the attendees can expect?
I think it's going to be interesting, and I think the primary thing that I would really kind of focus on is that, we have individuals that are very much embedded in the day-to-day efforts that are associated with the laboratory is actually doing. So I'm quite excited to be able to share our experiences and to have individuals speaking on the exact things they do on a daily basis and how that really translates into what we are doing as a laboratory to help stop the opioid epidemic.
All right, Frederick Strathmann, thank you so much for your time today. All the best.
Yeah, thank you.